Welcome back to the vBrownBag Build Day here at Ravello. I have the great pleasure of being joined by one of the founders to give us some of the stories of the origins of Ravello. So, Benny, thank you very much for joining me, and could you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, this is Benny Schnaider. I'm the co-founder of Ravello Systems. I was the president and the chairman of the company.
And this is not the first place that you've done development. You have a history in the virtualization community or industry prior to Ravello Systems.
Correct, exactly. So our previous company was Kubernetes. Kubernetes is the company who did KVM. That company was acquired by Red Hat in 2008. So we have a deep understanding and knowledge of the virtualization as a technology and its application.
And so you were then acquired by Red Hat, and obviously the KVM development has continued onwards there, but you must have seen some sort of opportunity. I'm really interested to hear the sort of inspiration story, what opportunity you saw that led you to actually go out and start another startup and start this particular startup. So
correct.
Nice story.
So it was Rami Tamir, which is my co-founder. He was the CEO of the company, and myself, who served in Red Hat after the acquisition for a little bit over 2 years. I was, among other things, VP of Business Development, in the sense that I had an opportunity to watch the evolution of the cloud and to see the type of challenges that cloud providers and their customers were having in adopting the public cloud.
So it was challenges around the need to completely re-architect your applications to sit on the public clouds at the time.
So at the time, this was kind of interesting. We saw a phenomena where most of the cloud provider user, I'm talking about 2011, the end of 2011, were born in the cloud type of application. These are mainly startups that have built their application from scratch to take advantage of the cloud architecture and overcome some of the limitations that the cloud was having. So I remember Rami and myself sitting in during lunch. It was in a restaurant, and we said, look, it's about time to start a new company. What are the new things that are hot? What are the things that we should look at? And obviously the cloud came as an interesting challenge and something that we should take a good look at. So we asked ourselves, given what I just told you, what are the challenges and why are big companies not adopting the cloud? So there were the regular suspects like security,
compliance,
job security, data security, compliance,
governance.
There was NIH, what it will do to my job if I'm an IT guy in a big company. But there was another one, which is the cloud, public cloud environment is different than the private environment that people were using. Specifically, there was one feature that caught our eye, and this was layer 2 networking. Right. So apparently, the typical application of most of enterprise application at that time was based on layer 2 networking. So there was always, if you think about it, load balancer with VLAN connections to the servers behind it. And this is like a typical application that doesn't have solution in the public cloud because public cloud, because of its architecture, doesn't support layer 2 networking.
Right. It's all, you should be using service names and discovery by lookups rather than by hard-coded locations.
Exactly. So what it meant, it meant for enterprises that even though they had the will to go to the public cloud and they overcome all the other issues and excuses that we mentioned before, it brought them to a point where they said, even if we want to, we'll have so much work to do, we better not even go there. And we thought, is there a solution that we can come up with that will make their life moving to the public cloud easy? And initially, the thought was to develop a shim layer that will sit between the OS, the guest OS, and the hypervisor of the cloud. And that's the way we started thinking about what became later on the technology behind the Ravello.
So that at that stage, it was more of a more aligned to something like VXLAN that would happen almost in guest.
Actually,
and do the networking.
We were thinking about it more from the OS perspective rather than from the networking perspective. So we thought why don't we have a solution very similar to the virtualization concept? You don't touch anything. You take the binary as is, and you run them as is. So we realized very quickly that we need another technology that doesn't exist, basically nested virtualization, to do all this magic that will intercept the calls coming from the guest VM, and will do the magic of putting communication into tunnels and transferring them to the other side. And the challenge was, can we do nested virtualization in good enough performance to make it real? So we knew this is the problem, this is the solution, and this is the challenge. And that's what got us excited, because our background, Rami and myself, background is technical. And we said, this is a good problem to have, because number one, it's interesting. Number two, if we can solve it with a reasonable performance. So it's not if we can solve it. People were already solving the problem before. We had Turtle, IBM was producing the nested virtualization, but performance was not good enough, and there were other issues. So we said, can we really solve the problem with good enough? If we can, then we'll have a barrier of entry that other people will have hard time overcoming.
Huge amount of engineering effort to get to that point. Correct. To be a leader.
So we basically, from that point, we went into two tracks, if you want. One was the technical one, and the other one was the product. So on the technical one, we set kind of a threshold from performance perspective and feature perspective. Can we do it? So we built the prototype with the help of some other good people. Like Itzik Idos was one of those guys. And we said, if this will be good enough, then we have something good going for us.
Turn into a real product. And
we can build a company around it, and we have a good solution. This one took about 3 months to get to a point where we felt that it is good enough and we can build on top of it.
Sure.
The technical challenge, I want you to understand, was it's not only to do it in a regular way, but to do it with the limitation that we had. What I mean by that, we were running in a non-cooperative environment. Specifically, we were running on top of existing hypervisor that was not necessarily cooperative with us.
It was never intended to run another hypervisor on top.
Correct. Or it was only intended to do one thing, to run a guest OS. And we had to cheat on the cloud provider hypervisor and make it believe that we are running a VM. So this was additional challenge that we were having.
So you had to provide something that was looking similar both upwards into the VM that you're running and downwards to the hypervisor below.
Right. Exactly. So to the hypervisor below, it should look exactly like a VM. And to the VM, it should look like an hypervisor. And that was part of the shim layer I was talking about, and part of the nested virtualization that we were developing. And this brings me to the product challenge. So from the product challenge, the vision that we had was that we'll create a new entity, which is an application virtualization. What I mean by that, we'll have all the components related to running the application. The VMs, the overlay network, the overlay storage, and the dynamic behavior of the application in one monolithic entity, which we called over time the capsule.
Right.
And the concept was, let's have some very powerful operation that we can operate and perform on this capsule. So, for example, we can easily take a copy, create a copy, we can take a state, we can restart the capsule from an on state, we can compress it if we care about cost, and we can expand it using more resources if we care about performance.
Right.
And this was kind of the roadmap from the product. And the next component that we had to tackle was the business model.
Yes.
How do we charge for it? So we said that we will build basically a virtual cloud provider business model, very similar to, at the time, we had the emerging virtual mobile operator. These are people who provide mobile operators but don't own any infrastructure. They don't have antennas, they don't have base station, they don't have fiber. They are protected by the regulator to open up the
competition
network for
and the networks. Yes, we have a few in New Zealand because we're a small market, so the MVNO is a way to get into the market.
Right. So actually, the leading places at that time were the European one. I was involved with some activity in this space, and there were, at that time, big deregulation in Israel, and we thought this will be a good business model to follow. But because we didn't have the regulator to protect us, we needed to have another set of features that will help bring customer to our site. And these were mainly features that we can do and the cloud provider could not. And mainly around networking. So if you look at the overall value of what Ravello was providing, it was in several areas, but the must-have and those that couldn't be delivered by any other player in the market, including the cloud provider, was the layer 2 networking.
And then, of course, you built out around it. I really liked the business model where you get one bill and it's from Ravello. Now Oracle, you don't get a bill from whichever cloud you happen to use. You actually roll that up and on-bill it yourselves, which is nice. It's not that I'm getting an AWS bill and a Ravello bill separately, which is
Thank
cool.
you. Yes.
And, of course, now that you've been acquired by Oracle, this is opening up a whole other world of business and of opportunities for development.
Right. So exactly. So I already mentioned that we were running in non-collaborative hypervisor environment. Now it's different. Now we are running on an hypervisor, KVM or Zenbase, which is cooperative with us, or we are cooperative with them, which means that we are getting far better performance than we got before. It also means that we can finally get access to the hardware resources that are available in the silicon, mainly what Intel and AMD are providing, which brings another level of performance improvement, and it can make the nested too. So once we have done the virtualization, the nested virtualization, we can run the hypervisor on top of an hypervisor and then run a few VMs.
Because, of course, that was the functionality I first saw Ravello at an OpenStack Summit a few years ago, and thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if, in addition to running a hypervisor on top of the cloud hypervisor, we could run vSphere on top. And a little while later, I participated in the launch of that, and my AutoLab is now the most downloaded blueprint in the repo, and it uses multiple layers of virtualization through.
I really remember you coming along, though I didn't meet you in person, and I saw it as a good customer testimonial, that it is really viable use case for many other people to use.
Yes.
I can tell you that in the early days, I think it was like 2 years ago, performance sucked. And I appreciate you guys having the patience to work with us.
Yeah.
At the same time, we realized that some of the feature, like the ability to easily replicate design, to be able to download the complete blueprint from the repo and deploy it anywhere, was a big powerful for a company like yourself.
And the other thing for those of us who are studying and learning is that we often can't afford to own our own large lab. And so I was very used to trying to work with as little resources as possible.
Right.
And it took me a while to unwind that as I was using the Ravello platform to say there is an infinite resource available. How much do I actually want?
Right.
And that was quite an
so
approach.
Thanks to people like yourself, we could carry this use case further on. And I'm glad to tell you that now, if you try the performance, you'll see the significant improvement because we are running in such a friendly and cooperative environment. On the business side, of course, we have the selling power of Oracle. So it's not only a small startup which is trying to sell its product. It's something that has far bigger footprint and far better reach within the target customers.
Excellent, Benny. Well, I think we need to close it out here, and thank you very much for coming and spending some time with us.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.